and C just to keep you here for an hour listening to my stale jokes. Shall we take a vote on whether to go with B or C? Anyway, I'm Victor Raskin, a faculty member associated with CERIAS and associate director. It's my honor and privilege and pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Paula DeWitte, who will talk to you on what you see on the screen. Paula, in my experience, one of the rare breed of people who combine actual research capabilities with the ability to get the funding agencies to understand why they should be paying for it. She's one of the most successful grant getters in a very competitive environment. Let me just say that when we met a couple of years ago here in Indiana, and she successfully recruited me to consult for a company that she was associated with, then ontological semantics, I was greatly impressed. She didn't know that by the fact that she had been funded by the Department of Homeland Security. Until then, I had never met anybody who had seen a cent of money from the Department of Homeland Security. Paula also happens to be a CS graduate. She got her master's degree here. I will not tell you when, and then continued towards a PhD in computer science with the emphasis in natural language processing. She has been involved in information security for any number of years, and all the grants I have been referring to are in the area of information security. And with that, I will just give the floor to Dr. DeWitte.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So before I talk, I kind of like to find out who my audience is. Because there's nothing worse than kind of having someone come in and say you're teaching to people who have to be there, right? So most of you are engineers, computer scientists, okay? You have an interest in cybersecurity? You want to hear really boring technical talk? Because you're not going to, okay? Because I've always been interested in implementation. And so if you notice anything, maybe, you might notice I changed my title on the airplane coming over last night because I'm also always kind of thinking. And so one of the things why I'm not in academia, why I am more in the commercial sector, is because I always like to say, how are you going to implement it? So I look back through some of the abstracts and some of the talks you've had, and they've been very interesting about specific algebras for security and these other things. And they're very focused on a technical area. But what I want to give you today is a bigger picture, because most of you aren't going to be in academia, I predict. True? Are most of you going to go in the commercial world? Okay, and the commercial world runs on what can you do? What can you implement? You know, you might come up with a great algorithm that cuts this and cuts that and is beautiful and will get you all kind of accolades on the academic area, but if it doesn't have a real-world implementation and some kind of benefit, it's not going to work. So today I want you to kind of I want to be this like an idea thing. I want you to kind of stretch out from what you're thinking about security. This describes work in process that I'm doing. And when I say work in process, I live in San Antonio, Texas now. San Antonio, Texas is home to Air Intelligence Agency and will be a second home for the National Security Agency. And I am writing a book with a NSA-trained super hacker who basically has a whole lot of experiences in things he can't tell me about, which he occasionally drops like, well, you know, when we broke into the North Korean computers, or when this happened, or when that happened, all right? And basically, he came to the conclusion after 20 or 30 years in the field that he doesn't see enough of people understanding what it means to have secure systems, is one, and two, how to implement secure systems, okay? Most people think when they're talking about secure systems, you're talking about the computer or the network or the communications, right? And that turns out to be only a small part of it. It's the most fun part if you like technology. So, first of all, I changed the title because my title originally said system, and I want to think of this as an environment. And what is the environment? Okay? And that environment is everything. It's the physical, it's the human, it's the administration and policies, and it's the computers, the networks, and the communications. Second of all, obviously, their stakes in cybersecurity are getting higher. On 9/11, we had someone with a new paradigm fly planes as missiles into buildings. Now, what if a terrorist could sit across the ocean and break into our Wall Street and bring down the confidence in the American banking system, right, and never have to go through our borders? Or what about mass identity theft? You know, it used to be somebody would hit you up in a bar. You know, when I went to college, you'd go to a conference and you'd hear these stories where somebody got to talking to them and found out their name and where you went to school and some other information from you and then stole your identity. Well, that was real time consuming, right? Now you can steal identity on 100,000 people at a time, usually by the weakest link in the security system, which is people, right? I leave my laptop, you know, and suddenly, you know, you have, 10,000, or I think it was 10,000 current and active duty soldiers whose identity was stolen. Another big motivation is compliance. Are you aware what SOX is? Sarbanes-Oxley, okay? HIPAA, right? So, and I'm currently, I don't know, Victor didn't mention this, I'm currently going to mid-career definition and getting a law degree. And part of what part of my motivation is that there's not enough technical people in the legal field who understand technology, but also there's going to be huge liability from this. You know, if your records are stolen and there's 100,000, somebody was just telling me about a case here in Indiana, stole 100,000 records and there's been a class action suit filed at $5,000 a person. Then there's the privacy issues, right? We have Hewlett Packard, incredibly smart people who said, gee, I didn't know that was illegal. You know, I didn't know that you couldn't pre-text and get somebody's phone messages. If you read the Wall Street Journal article on it a few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal reporter, who was actually part of this internal investigation from Hewlett Packard, made a comment that said, they knew more about me than I did. Okay? And they did that by running new technologies. So basically what I want to talk to you about today is kind of connect security to the needs and the requirements of the real world. Give you some things to think about. If you have questions, ask me. Okay, if I'm boring you, tell me, right? And as I mentioned, the kind of work that I'm working on now, I want to bring up two key concepts. We've recently identified 6 aspects of security that we are trying to drive into this overarching framework, and I've mentioned them to you. The people, which is the weakest link, through no fault sometimes of their own. The what I call the administration, how you push paper, how you have policies, how you have procedures. The physical, the buildings. You know, we all sit in buildings and we think we're all secure because we've got our secure networks, and yet there's been cases of people under the floor. There's been cases of listening devices. We're in a window. We're being monitored. And then a new notion of what I'm going to call a framework to put this together. Okay, so first of all, I'm hoping what you're thinking is, what does she mean by a framework? What does she mean by integrated? What does she mean by environment? What does she mean by security? So when you leave here in an hour, I kind of want you to be thinking of what constitutes a true security and a truly secure systems or environment. And I tend to use the term systems and environment interchangeably, but I mean the whole enchilada kind of thing. All right? The physical infrastructure is critical, the people in it, how those people do their work, and then the computers, the networks, and the modes of communication. Okay, so let me go back. Victor was talking to a group of graduate students I was talking to earlier today, and one of them asked me how I could be so successful in my research career, and one is I'm always bringing ideas from different forums together, and about 3 weeks ago I had this insight. So a long time ago when I was doing research for the Air Force, there was this big focus on developing integrated systems, and I'm not even sure that's in the vernacular anymore because I think that problem's been chewed up and spit out. And I taught database and software engineering for several years, and I used to trick my students, right, and talk about, well, what does it mean to have systems, integrated systems? And I'd give them the idea of, you know, that means you can pull things from disparate databases, or you can understand your data or your processes, and my elliptical ... there, it means a lot of things. So my trick I used to play is, so you have records of somebody, John from Massachusetts, and Ronald from California,